everyone, I'm Mary Burton. I'm the RD&E Coordinator of Avocados Australia. Welcome to the Spotlight series. This Avocado Australia series helps make growers be aware of the research and development projects that are working to benefit Australian avocado industry. Today we'll be talking about the Avocado Industry Biosecurity Strategy 2022 to 2026 project, also known as AV21002. I'll be speaking with the stakeholders involved in this project. To start with, we're going to hear from John Tyus, Avocado Australia's CEO. Can you tell me what this project involves?
The project's about helping us understand and address risks posed to the avocado industry from exotic pests and diseases. So it aims to improve avocado industry biosecurity resilience by documenting standard operating procedures and conducting simulation exercises. It's also working with growers to increase the uptake of appropriate on-farm biosecurity practices.
So how does the project benefit growers?
From this project, growers can be confident that we've got the systems in place to respond quickly and effectively to new incursions. From experiences that I've seen observing other industries, you really don't want to be learning how to swim in the middle of a tsunami. And so this project is really about preparing us for battle in peacetime.
So who's involved in the project and what will they aim to achieve?
So this is a multifaceted project with 6 different service providers involved, all providing different elements of the project. So I'm the project leader, and Grant Telford is managing the project on a day-to-day basis. We have Queensland DPI and Western Australia DPIRD working on pathway analyses for high-priority plant pests, as well as developing the on-farm biosecurity strategy. We've got Tom Compass from the University of Melbourne, who's providing economic benefit cost analyses, looking at risks and returns. And we've got Plant Health Australia undertaking gap analyses of risk assessments. And they're also developing emergency response capability workshops with the Avocados Australia staff and board, with including some simulation exercises.
Our next interviewee is Grant Telford from Avocados Australia, and he's the project manager. So I'd like to know, what's your involvement in the project?
As you mentioned, I'm the project manager for the 5-year biosecurity strategy project. I work on behalf of Avocados Australia in that role. Some of the key duties that I perform are the key management processes that are required to be performed for any project, and that includes development of risk management plans to be prepared for any unforeseen circumstance that may arise, monitoring and evaluation plans to ensure that the project stays on track, communications plans to relay results to stakeholders in the most appropriate way. That's something that's obviously ever evolving in the way that we do that based on feedback. Annual operation plans to support project delivery. So that's supporting coordination of all of the other project contributors in the that are involved in the project. Budget monitoring and performance reporting, and building capacity within AAL staff and its board, which is particularly important for the project, with Avocados Australia being the lead agency representing avocado growers.
So how does your component support the overall program?
My role in the project supports coordination of the project across all project collaborators and stakeholders. As you're aware, there is a number of project collaborators that work across the project, including representatives from Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia, and Canberra. We have a mix of scientists that are actually involved, whether they be from pest pathway experts, pest experts, systems experts, or communications experts with growers.
So how does your component benefit growers?
As a person from a farming family, I can appreciate the multitude of risks faced by farming families in producing a crop. And that's where I think my main strength is. My input into the development and evolution of the project, starting with an appreciation that biosecurity risks are ever evolving and ever changing, and that risk mitigation efforts by growers need to be reasonable, practical, and fit for purpose. That's what drives me to produce the best possible support for growers in delivery of the project. It's really important in my particular role that not only do we talk to project collaborators, but we also talk to growers so we can get a measure of how we're going and how that fits within their circumstances and best fits their need to mitigate that risk.
My next interviewee is Professor Tom Compass, Professor of Environmental Economics and Biosecurity at the University of Melbourne. So what's your involvement in the project?
My part of the project was to find or estimate the potential economic damages that come with certain kinds of exotic pests that might harm the avocado industry, with a focus in particular on oriental fruit fly, asking the question, what would happen if there was a non-detection of oriental fruit fly in the avocado industry over the first 24 months of an incursion, to see in particular what the dollar damages are and what the impact on industry would be.
How does your component support the overall program?
The avocado industry is a very important industry in Australia. And in fact, its farm gate value is well over $500 million just in 22-23, and it's projected to grow quite considerably over time. So our task was to try and see what the potential damages would be from invasive pests like oriental fruit fly or seed moth or person mites, to try and determine whether or not we're doing the right thing in terms of surveillance, trying to detect early, and indeed to avoid these damages that we've outlined in the project. Use a very large dimensional spatial model to map how fruit fly, for example, might move through avocado farms and what sort of damages it would generate before it's detected, or even after it's detected and before it's managed or eradicated. So my part of the project was trying to, if you like, sort of put an alarm bell out to say, look, there are potential damages that come with these exotic pests, and we need to plan for it and work carefully to make sure that we're protected.
So how does your component benefit growers?
So what we showed was, through our spatial economic modeling, that a potential incursion of something like oriental fruit fly over the first 24 months might generate $90 million in damages. It's quite substantial. These are mostly treatment costs, some trade losses, some management costs, but there's a lot of damage potentially that comes from this pest. And the earlier you detect, the better it generally tends to be. You avoid many of those damages. There's another component too to the project that's really quite useful for farmers. Our analysis shows that the active surveillance grid for fruit fly in Queensland is insufficient. It's too coarse. On average, maybe 4 or 5 kilometers per trap. It has to be much tighter than that. So it tells you, with the active surveillance grid that's currently in place, there's not enough protection to make sure that we detect something like oriental fruit fly early. And in fact, it tells you that on-farm biosecurity, local farm inspection, what farmers do is in fact really quite essential now, because the active surveillance program is not quite right. So you need to shift the focus and affect the burden and the cost, unfortunately, to the farm to see whether or not they can detect these things early before they spread from farm to farm and cause substantial damages.
For our next interview, we're joined by Dr. Stephen Quarrell. I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us what your role is.
So my name's Dr. Stephen Quarrell. I'm the Biosecurity Planning Manager here at Plant Health Australia. So my main role is to perform a gap analysis of exotic pests and diseases that might impact on the Australian avocado industry. So it's really based on trying to really inform or develop a continual improvement of the Australian avocado industry's biosecurity preparedness.
So how does your component support the overall program?
So here at PHA, we've got a range of experts that understand the impacts of exotic pests and diseases. And really our role here in performing this gap analysis is to understand what impacts a pest or disease incursion into Australia might bring. So we perform risk assessments to try and work out what the likelihood of a pest being introduced into the country is, but also what the economic impact of that introduction might have. And we're also looking at how industry might be able to manage a pest or disease if it was introduced into the country. So, what biological controls are available, what chemical management strategies they could implement, integrated pest management, but also looking at what impacts on trade that might have. So, if we got a pest into a certain region in Australia, how would that impact on industry's ability to move fruit around the country, or even move it into some of our important export markets?
So how does your component benefit growers?
So our role here in PHA is really to give the Australian avocado industry some confidence. So confidence that they know what external pests and diseases are overseas that might impact on their ability to produce avocados. Also confidence that if something does get in, they know how to manage it, whether that's through good integrated pest management or biological controls or chemical controls. And also a confidence that if something does get in and it does get established, that they'll be able to continue to trade, whether that be within Australia or overseas. Because ultimately, the whole premise of biosecurity is to keep growers growing.
Our next interviewee is Mandy Christopher, Principal Research Scientist at the Queensland Department of Primary Industries. What's your involvement in the project?
My involvement in this project has been to lead a group of people looking at some exotic pests for the avocado industry. So pests that don't occur in Australia at the moment or are perhaps regionalised in a particular part of Australia. And we looked at each of these individual pests, about 20 of them, and looked at how they could be moved around Australia and moved between different farms.
So how does your component support the overall program?
So this component supports the overall program by making these resources available to avocado growers and also the other researchers in the program. They were used at a workshop last year where some growers came and helped us workshop some of the biosecurity practices that avocado growers could use on their farms to try to prevent these exotic pests and pathogens coming onto their properties if an incursion was to occur. They've also been put up on the Avocado Best Practice website, so they're available for all avocado growers in Australia to go and look at.
So how does your component benefit growers?
This component of the project benefits growers by giving them information about some of these exotic pests that are around in other parts of the world that we don't have in Australia at the moment, and helps them think about how these pests might move around if they were to get into Australia, and to think about the practices that they could put on their farms, something suitable to the scale of their farm to try to protect their farm from keeping these pests and pathogens out and to keep their businesses running if an incursion happened in their area. That could be as simple as putting up a sign, possibly putting up some fences or directing people to park away from your production area, things like that they could do to protect their farm and to keep their business operating if an incursion was to happen in their area.
We're now going to talk with Bridie Carr, Senior Extension Horticulturalist, Horticulture and Forestry Science, Queensland Department of Primary Industries. Bridie, what's your involvement with the project?
Hi Mary, my involvement with the project is leading the Queensland Department of Primary Industries contributions to the on-farm adoption of on-farm biosecurity practices. So that component comprises of developing, working alongside Mandy Christopher, who has worked on the high priority pest pathway analyses. We held a workshop with growers, leading the conversation around what potential on-farm biosecurity practices would work well for industry. And from that, we're now looking forward to engaging with growers to get a better understanding at the regional level about how these practices might be implemented on farm, what those barriers might be to adoption of those practices. And then from there, that information is going to be fed into an adoption strategy, which then will lead on to the development of a biosecurity manual. And then from that manual, we're going to be developing extension materials to support growers with adoption.
How does your component support the overall program?
The component that I'm leading is the kind of grower interface with the project. So making sure that growers' voices, opinions, and perceptions of biosecurity are part of the conversation when developing future extension support and preparedness and adoption of on-farm biosecurity practices for the industry.
How does your component benefit growers?
The component benefits growers by making sure that growers are leading the conversation around adoption of best practice in terms of biosecurity for the avocado industry. Having growers lead this conversation will support adoption far more than being told what to do. And growers listen to growers, and we want to make sure that that conversation is led by them.
You've now heard from everybody in the project. If you'd like any further information, please contact me on my email, rde@avocado.org.au.